très content et je pense que on va venir payer l'oignon là aussi.
My people, today we mark a turning point. With India, we signed a $1.2 billion tractor deal to modernize farming, boost food security, and create jobs.
Burkina Faso just signed a $1.2 billion agricultural deal with India, the kind of move that could flip the entire balance of power in West Africa. Tractors, money, and technology are about to pour into a country once written off as poor and dependent. But is this really just about farming, or the birth of a new era of sovereignty? Let's find that out. The announcement landed like a thunderclap in Ouagadougou. On a humid August morning, cameras crowded into the government hall, where President Ibrahim Traoré stood at the podium, flanked by senior officials and visiting Indian diplomats. The words he spoke instantly rippled across West Africa. Burkina Faso had sealed a $1.2 billion agricultural deal with India. The agreement, described as transformative, would bring in fleets of tractors, advanced machinery, and new agricultural financing, setting the stage for what Traoré called a new chapter in our nation's independence. For a landlocked country long overlooked in global trade, the figure alone was staggering. $1.2 billion was not just an investment, it was a statement. Burkina Faso had rarely featured in headlines about major international economic deals, yet suddenly, it was at the center of a partnership that would rival some of the continent's biggest agricultural initiatives. The sheer scale surprised even seasoned analysts, who were more accustomed to hearing about Burkina Faso in the context of security challenges or political upheavals. The deal's announcement was met with contrasting reactions at home and abroad. Inside Burkina Faso, the atmosphere was electric. Supporters poured into the streets waving flags and chanting Traoré's name, framing the deal as proof that their nation was stepping into a new era of dignity. Farmers, traders, and ordinary citizens called it the birth of something we were told we could never have. On social media, the news spread rapidly, with Burkinabe youth posting images of tractors as symbols of power, strength, and pride. In the region, neighboring governments watched with quiet unease. For years, Burkina Faso had been seen as a fragile state struggling to manage insecurity. Now, with a single deal, it has positioned itself as a potential agricultural hub that could dominate food trade across the Sahel. To countries still dependent on food imports, this raised uncomfortable questions. Would Burkina Faso soon undercut their markets? Would it alter regional trade flows in favor of Ouagadougou? Outside Africa, the announcement triggered both fascination and suspicion. Western media outlets framed the deal as unexpected, questioning how a relatively small economy could manage such a large financial package. Some commentators worried aloud about whether Burkina Faso had the capacity to absorb such an ambitious initiative, while others speculated that the deal represented a deeper geopolitical realignment. For India, the partnership was evidence of a bold new strategy in Africa. For France and other Western nations, it was a reminder of their fading grip in the Sahel. Inside the government hall, however, there was no doubt. Traoré's speech was laced with symbolism. He invoked the sacrifices of Burkinabe farmers, who for decades had struggled to produce enough with little more than hoes and hand tools. He reminded the audience that his government was not merely buying equipment but rewriting history. In his words, "We are no longer beggars at the gates of those who once ruled us. We are partners shaping our own destiny." The applause that followed drowned out every other sound in the room. What made the announcement even more shocking was its timing. Only months earlier, Burkina Faso had unveiled a series of projects to nationalize parts of its gold sector and invest in local agro-processing plants. Critics argued that the state's resources were overstretched. Yet instead of scaling back, Traoré doubled down with a deal so large that it instantly redefined the scale of his ambitions. The message was clear. Burkina Faso was no longer content to take incremental steps. It was leaping forward. As the day wore on, analysts scrambled to piece together the details. What exactly did the $1.2 billion package include? Who was financing it? How would the tractors be distributed? Would smallholder farmers actually benefit, or would the deal be dominated by elites? Questions multiplied, but one thing was undeniable. Burkina Faso had caught the world's attention in a way it hadn't for decades. Yet beneath the headlines, the core question remained unresolved. Could tractors and machines really change the trajectory of a nation? And if so, what made mechanization such a decisive step in Burkina Faso's gamble for independence? When the announcement of the $1.2 billion deal broke, many observers outside Burkina Faso were left asking, why tractors? Why would a government prioritize such an enormous investment in machinery at a time when security, infrastructure, and health also demand attention? The answer lies in the country's silent struggle, one fought not on the battlefield, but in the soil itself. For decades, Burkinabe farmers have cultivated their fields with rudimentary tools, hoes, wooden plows, and manual labor under scorching Sahelian suns. These tools have symbolic value, representing resilience and survival. But survival is not prosperity. In a nation where more than 70% of people depend on agriculture for their livelihoods, yields have remained painfully low. It is not uncommon for families to work acres of land only to produce just enough to feed themselves, with little left to sell in markets. The absence of modern tools has chained farmers to cycles of poverty and food insecurity. Mechanization is the sharp break from that cycle. A tractor is not just a machine, it multiplies human capacity. Land that would take weeks to clear with hand tools can be plowed in a day. Planting cycles become faster, harvests are more predictable, and post-harvest losses are reduced. With tractors, Burkina Faso can scale farming from subsistence to commercial production. In a region plagued by droughts and unpredictable weather, timing is everything, and tractors give farmers the ability to act quickly when rain falls, instead of losing precious days to manual labor. What makes this deal unique is not only the delivery of machines, but the ecosystem around them. India's involvement ensures that farmers will not simply receive equipment and be left on their own. Training programs, workshops, and local service hubs will be established to teach operators how to run the tractors efficiently and technicians how to repair them. Spare parts, too often the missing link in past African modernization projects, will be part of the package. The intention is clear. These machines must not become rusting monuments in village squares, but living engines of productivity. Mechanization also opens doors to crop diversification. Traditionally, Burkinabe farmers focused on staples like millet and sorghum because they were manageable with hand tools. With tractors, farmers can expand into wheat, maize, rice, and cash crops. This shift not only boosts food availability, but creates new streams of income. Burkina Faso recently announced a target of harvesting 6,000 tons of wheat in the 2025-26 season, a figure unimaginable without mechanized farming. Tractors make such goals realistic. The broader significance lies in how mechanization redefines farming as a career. For generations, agriculture has been seen as backbreaking, low-status work. Young people often turned away from the land, seeking opportunities in cities or abroad. Mechanization changes that image. Operating machinery, managing larger plots, or working as trained technicians creates new respect and economic potential in rural communities. In this sense, tractors are not just engines of agriculture, but engines of social transformation. Still, questions remain. If mechanization is so critical, why did it take until now for Burkina Faso to embrace it at this scale? The answer is rooted not in agriculture itself, but in the shifting geopolitics of Africa. The arrival of India in this space raises deeper questions. Why is New Delhi investing so heavily in Burkina Faso? And why is this partnership happening now? Let's pause for a second to say, big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. The tractors may plow Burkinabe fields, but the strategy behind them stretches far beyond the borders of Ouagadougou. India has long had ties with Africa, but those ties were often limited to trade in pharmaceuticals, small-scale investments, and cultural exchanges. Unlike China, which aggressively built roads, railways, and ports across the continent, or the West, which maintained dominance through aid and extraction, India remained a quieter player. This deal represents a turning point. New Delhi is no longer satisfied with being a marginal partner. It wants to plant its flag as a serious stakeholder in Africa's future. Why Burkina Faso, and why now? Timing is everything. The Sahel is undergoing dramatic shifts. France, the former colonial power, is rapidly losing influence as military regimes across Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso push back against its presence. Russia has stepped into the security vacuum, providing arms and military support. China continues to secure infrastructure and resource contracts. Into this crowded field steps India, but with a different playbook: food security. By investing in agriculture, the lifeblood of Sahelian economies, India positions itself as a partner that touches daily lives, not just state security or infrastructure megaprojects. The deal also reflects India's own strategic needs. With a population of 1.4 billion, food security is a permanent concern for New Delhi. Climate volatility has made its own harvests vulnerable, and dependence on global grain markets leaves India exposed to shocks. Partnering with African countries like Burkina Faso provides insurance. If Burkina Faso's agricultural sector booms under mechanization, India gains both a trusted food supplier and a loyal political ally in global forums. This is why Indian financing went beyond loans to include grants and public-private partnerships. The goal is not exploitation, but entrenchment of influence. On the African side, the move is equally significant. For too long, development was dictated by Western aid agencies, whose funding came with strings attached: policy reforms, austerity measures, and open markets for foreign corporations. India's approach offers a countermodel. It emphasizes collaboration and mutual gain, presenting itself as a fellow global South nation that understands Africa's struggles. This is not lost on leaders like Ibrahim Traoré, who has repeatedly stressed that sovereignty begins when Africa chooses its partners on its own terms. Critics in Western capitals are already voicing unease. They see India's rise in the Sahel as another blow to their diminishing influence. For decades, Africa's agriculture was tied to Western-controlled food supply chains, with little room for autonomy. Now, with India stepping in, the balance is shifting. If Burkina Faso succeeds in turning itself into a breadbasket, it won't be Paris, Washington, or Brussels that reaps the credit. It will be New Delhi. But geopolitics is only half the story. For ordinary Burkina-based citizens, the question is simpler. Will this partnership translate into jobs and food on the table? Can India's gamble actually deliver tangible benefits for the people who need them most? To answer that, we must look at the social and economic ripple effects of the deal, particularly for the country's youth and its long fight against food insecurity. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. If geopolitics explains why the deal was signed, the true test of its success lies in what it delivers for ordinary Burkina-based citizens. For a nation where over 70% of the population depends on agriculture for survival, this $1.2 billion agreement cannot remain an abstract number in government ledgers. It must translate into tangible livelihoods, jobs, incomes, and above all, food security. For Burkina Faso's youth, the timing could not be more urgent. Every year, thousands of young people enter the labor force, but opportunities remain scarce. Many are pushed toward precarious jobs in the informal economy, or worse, tempted to migrate across dangerous routes toward Europe. This deal changes the equation. Tractors require operators, mechanics, service providers, and technicians. Each machine introduced into a farming community opens up entire microeconomies, from those who supply spare parts to those who transport increased harvests to markets. Where once agriculture meant bending under the sun with a hoe, it now includes higher-skilled, better-paying roles that create dignity and pride. Agricultural modernization also creates ripple effects beyond the fields. Increased production demands storage facilities, processing plants, and distribution networks. Burkina Faso has already taken early steps, investing millions into agro-processing initiatives like tomato factories and wheat milling plants. With mechanization dramatically raising output, these industries are poised to expand. The jobs they create are not seasonal but permanent, embedding agriculture into a larger industrial value chain. In this way, tractors in the fields translate into employment in warehouses, factories, and transport hubs. Food security, however, remains the most immediate and critical benefit. Burkina Faso is no stranger to hunger. Repeated droughts, erratic rainfall, and global price shocks have forced the country to rely on costly imports of rice, wheat, and maize. For families, this dependence meant vulnerability. When prices spiked on international markets, plates went empty in Ouagadougou and beyond. Mechanization changes that dynamic. By enabling large-scale cultivation of wheat, rice, and maize, Burkina Faso can gradually close the gap between domestic demand and production. The government has already set its sights on harvesting 6,000 tons of wheat in the 2025-26 season. And with modern equipment, such figures are not merely symbolic but achievable. This shift has political implications as well. Food sovereignty is not simply about eating, it is about independence. Nations that cannot feed themselves are vulnerable to pressure from those who control the food supply. Traoré understands this all too well, which is why he has placed agriculture at the center of his sovereignty agenda. To him, every hectare cultivated with Burkinabe tractors is another step away from dependency and another step toward dignity. The youth see it too. On social media, young Burkinabe have turned tractors into emblems of empowerment, posting memes and slogans about how machines mean freedom. For them, this deal represents the possibility of building a life at home rather than risking it abroad. When jobs are available, migration becomes a choice rather than an escape. This social transformation may prove just as important as the food produced. Of course, challenges remain. Mechanization will not instantly erase decades of underdevelopment. Training programs must reach remote villages, infrastructure must keep pace with production, and corruption must be kept at bay to ensure tractors are distributed fairly. But for the first time in decades, hope outweighs despair in the conversation about agriculture. Yet the bigger question remains: can this single deal truly alter the way Africa approaches development itself? Is Burkina Faso setting a precedent that could inspire a continental shift away from dependency and toward strategic partnerships? The tractors and machinery may be rolling into Burkina Faso, but the deeper significance of this deal lies in what it symbolizes for Africa's place in the world. For decades, development across the continent was framed through the language of dependency. Western donors offering aid with strings attached, multinational corporations extracting raw resources while leaving little behind, and international financial institutions imposing policies that often undermine sovereignty. Burkina Faso's $1.2 billion agreement with India stands in sharp contrast to that history. It signals the possibility of a different path, one rooted in equal partnership, strategic cooperation, and the assertion of African agency. At the heart of this story is a philosophical shift. Instead of accepting a narrative where progress depends on external saviors, Burkina Faso is positioning itself as a decision-maker, choosing its partners, and charting its own economic trajectory. Traoré's government has consistently articulated this idea, insisting that sovereignty is not just about political independence, but about control over resources, industries, and food systems. The agricultural deal with India is one manifestation of that vision, but it is not isolated. It comes alongside other bold moves: the establishment of a national gold refinery, investments in agro-processing industries, and efforts to diversify the economy away from dependency on aid. Together, these steps form the scaffolding of a new model of development. What makes this model striking is the shift from aid dependency to mutual benefit. Unlike Western aid packages that often required Burkina Faso to liberalize markets or cut social spending, this deal is structured as a partnership where both sides gain. India secures a foothold in a strategic region and builds political goodwill, while Burkina Faso receives not just money but technology, machinery, and training. This is South-South cooperation in practice, nations of the global South finding ways to lift each other without repeating the exploitative patterns of colonialism. The ripple effects go beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Across Africa, other governments are watching closely. If Ouagadougou can leverage this partnership to boost food production, create jobs, and reduce imports, it will set a precedent. Leaders in Mali, Niger, Chad, and beyond will see the potential of forging similar deals, bypassing the traditional channels of Western aid. In this way, Burkina Faso is not only rewriting its own story, but potentially inspiring a continental shift in how Africa engages with the world. For the West, this represents a challenge. Their old model of dominance, rooted in financial control and resource extraction, is being eroded by new entrants like India, Russia, Turkey, and China. Each of these powers offers alternatives, but India's focus on agriculture is particularly strategic. While others build roads or sell weapons, India is investing in food, a resource as vital as any oil well or gold mine. If Burkina Faso becomes a breadbasket for West Africa, it will not only strengthen its sovereignty, but also position India as a partner in one of the continent's most critical sectors. Of course, the road ahead is not guaranteed. Success will depend on how effectively the tractors are deployed, how well farmers are trained, and how fairly the benefits are distributed. But even with these uncertainties, one fact is undeniable. The deal has shifted the conversation. Burkina Faso is no longer seen solely through the lens of instability or poverty. It is now being discussed as a potential model for strategic, sovereign-driven development. And that may be the most revolutionary outcome of all. By signing a deal that redefines what development can look like, Burkina Faso has shown that Africa need not remain trapped in the old cycles of dependency. It can choose its partners, set its priorities, and craft its future. The tractors may till the soil, but it is this new narrative of agency, sovereignty, and South-South solidarity that could be the real harvest of the $1.2 billion agreement. Will Burkina Faso's tractors truly plow a path to sovereignty? Has India just outmaneuvered the West in Africa's fields? Let us know in the comments section. Could this deal become the model for a new African future? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.